We at once see how deeply enrooted social instincts must have been in human nature, even at its lower stages. A savage who is capable of living under such an organization, and of freely submitting to rules which continually clash with his personal desires, certainly is not a beast devoid of ethical principles, and knowing no rein to its patience. But the facts become still more striking if we consider the immense antiquity of the clan organization. It is now known that the primitive Semites, the Greeks of Homer, and the prehistoric Romans, the Germans of Tacitus, the early Celts, and the early Slavonians all have had their own period of clan organization closely analogous to that of the Australians, the Red Indians, the Eskimos, and other inhabitants of the savage girdle. For the Semites and the Aryans, see especially Professor Maxim Kovalevsky's Primitive Law (in Russian), Moscow 1886 and 1887. Also his lectures delivered at Stockholm (Tableau des origines et de l'évolution de la famille et de la propriété, Stockholm 1890), which represents an admirable review of the whole question. Cf. also a post Die Gesetzliche Genossenschaft der Use Oldenburg 1875. So we must admit that either the evolution of marriage laws went on the same lines among all human races, or the rudiments of the clan rules were developed among some common ancestors of the Semites, the Aryans, the Polynesians, etc., before their differentiation into separate races took place, and that these rules were maintained until now among races long ago separated from the common stock. Both alternatives imply, however, an equally striking tenacity of the institution, such a tenacity that no assaults of the individual could break it down through the scores of thousands of years that it was in existence. The very persistence of the clan organization shows how utterly false it is to represent primitive mankind as a disorderly agglomeration of individuals who only obey their individual passions and take advantage of their personal force and cunningness against all other representatives of the species. Unbridled individualism is a modern growth, but it is not characteristic of primitive mankind. It would be impossible to enter here into a discussion of the origin of the marriage restrictions. Let me only remark that a division into groups similar to Morgan's Hawaiian exists among birds. The young broods live together separately from their parents. A like division might probably be traced among some mammals as well. As to the prohibition of relations between brothers and sisters, it is more likely to have arisen not from speculation about the bad effects of consanguinity, which speculations really do not seem probable, but to avoid the too easy precocity of like marriages. Under close cohabitation, it must have become of imperious necessity. I must also remark that in discussing the origin of new customs altogether, we must keep in mind that the savages, like us, have their thinkers and savants, wizards, doctors, prophets, etc., whose knowledge and ideas are in advance upon those of the masses, united as they are in their secret unions (another almost universal feature), they are certainly capable of exercising a powerful influence, and of enforcing customs the utility of which may not yet be recognized by the majority of the tribe. Going now over to the existing savages, we may begin with the Bushmen, who stand at a very low level of development, so low indeed that they have no dwellings and sleep in holes dug in the soil, occasionally protected by some screens. It is known that when Europeans settled in their territory and destroyed deer, the Bushmen began stealing the settlers' cattle, whereupon a war of extermination, too horrible to be related here, was waged against them. 500 Bushmen were slaughtered in 1774, 3,000 in 1808 and 1809 by the Farmers' Alliance, and so on. They were poisoned like rats, killed by hunters lying in ambush before the carcass of some animal, killed wherever met with. Colonel Collins in Phillips' Researches in South Africa, London, 1828, quoted by Waite, Sagan 334. So that our knowledge of the Bushmen, being chiefly borrowed from those same people who exterminated them, is necessarily limited. But still we know that when the Europeans came, the Bushmen lived in small tribes (or clans), sometimes federated together, that they used to hunt in common, and divided the spoil without quarrelling, that they never abandoned their wounded, and displayed strong affection to their comrades. Liechtenstein has a most touching story about a Bushman, nearly drowned in a river, who was rescued by his companions. They took off their furs to cover him, and shivered themselves. They dried him, rubbed him before the fire, and smeared his body with warm grease till they brought him back to life. And when the Bushmen found in Johann van der Walt a man who treated them well, they expressed their thankfulness by a most touching attachment to that man. Liechtenstein's Reisen im Südlichen Afrika, 2nd pages 92-97, Berlin, 1811. Burchell and Moffat both represent them as good-hearted, disinterested, true to their promises, and grateful. Waite's Anthropologie der Naturvölker, 2nd, pages 335, sequence. See also Fritsch die Eingeborenen Afrikas, Breslau, 1872, pages 386, sequence. And Grey Jar in South Africa, also W. Blake, A Brief Account of Bushman Folklore, Cape Town, 1875. All qualities which could develop only by being practiced within the tribe. As to their love to children, it is sufficient to say that when a European wished to secure a Bushman woman as a slave, he stole her child. The mother was sure to come into slavery to share the fate of the child. Élisée Reclus, Géographie universelle, 13th, 475. The same social manners characterize the Hottentots, who are but a little more developed than the Bushmen. Lubbock describes them as the filthiest animals, and filthy they really are. A fur suspended to the neck and worn till it falls to pieces is all their dress. Their huts are a few sticks assembled together and covered with mats, with no kind of furniture within. And though they kept oxen and sheep, and seemed to have known the use of iron before they made acquaintance with the Europeans, they still occupy one of the lowest degrees of the human scale. And yet those who knew them highly praised their sociability and readiness to aid each other. If anything is given to a Hottentot, he at once divides it among all present, a habit which, as is known, so much struck Darwin among the Fuegians. He cannot eat alone, and however hungry, he calls those who pass by to share his food, and when Colben expressed his astonishment thereat, he received the answer, "That is Hottentot manner." But this is not Hottentot manner only, it is an all but universal habit among the savages. Colben, who knew the Hottentots well and did not pass by their defects in silence, could not praise their tribal morality highly enough. "Their word is sacred," he wrote. "They know nothing of the corruptness and faithless arts of Europe. They live in great tranquillity and are seldom at war with their neighbours. They are all kindness and goodwill to one another." One of the greatest pleasures of the Hottentots certainly lies in their gifts and good offices to one another. The integrity of the Hottentots, their strictness and celerity in the exercise of justice, and their chastity are things in which they excel all or most nations in the world. P. Colben, The Present State of the Cape of Good Hope. Translated from the German by Mr. Medley, London, 1731, volume 1st, pages 59, 71, 333, 336, etc. Tashar, Barrow and Modi, quoted in Waite's Anthropology, 2nd, 335, sequence, fully confirm Colben's testimony. Let me only remark that when Colben wrote that they are certainly the most friendly, the most liberal, and the most benevolent people to one another that ever appeared on the earth, first 332, he wrote a sentence which has continually appeared since in the description of savages. When first meeting with primitive races, the Europeans usually make a caricature of their life, but when an intelligent man has stayed among them for a longer time, he generally describes them as the kindest or the gentlest race on the earth. These very same words have been applied to the Ostiaks, the Samoyeds, the Eskimos, the Dayaks, the Aleuts, the Papuas, and so on, by the highest authorities. I also remember having read them applied to the Tunguses, the Chukchis, the Sioux, and several others. The very frequency of that high commendation already speaks volumes in itself. The natives of Australia do not stand on a higher level of development than their South African brothers. Their huts are of the same character. Very often simple screens are the only protection against cold winds. In their food they are most indifferent. They devour horribly petrified corpses, and cannibalism is resorted to in times of scarcity. When first discovered by Europeans, they had no implements but in stone or bone, and these were of the roughest description. Some tribes had even no canoes and did not know barter trade, and yet when their manners and customs were carefully studied, they proved to be living under that elaborate clan organization which I have mentioned on a preceding page. The native